All right, so everybody, welcome to our webinar series from the Maryland School for the Blind. My name is Conchita. I'm the Low Incidence Specialist for Blind and Low Vision students. We have a couple features for this webinar. We have a chat section. So I've put a couple of things in there. You can take a survey. Contact hours for this webinar. So you will get that after you fill out the survey. You can check out our TVI portal for Maryland that has a bunch of events, everything happening around blindness in Maryland. But if you're not in Maryland, you can still check it out for all the professional development webinars that we're hosting. And all of our videos will be recorded and will go live on our YouTube page. There's a link in the chat box. And for those of you joining us over the phone, don't worry, I'm going to email this out after the presentation along with the PowerPoint. So in April, on the 10th, we have a parent webinar, Introduction to the Maryland Library for the Blind and Physically Handicapped. On the 18th, we have a webinar on Bookshare. On the 23rd, we have types and uses of slate and styluses. On the 24th, we have Introduction to Assistive Technology for low vision students. On the 25th, we have a webinar on NFB Newsline in the classroom, and on the 29th, we have CVI Part 2. So feel free to register for any of those, and I will email that information out as well. So we are joined today by Rene, and Rene is over at the Parents Place of Maryland. Thank you, Rene, for joining us for this webinar. Rene is going to be presenting on how to be your child's best advocate. So I'm going to turn it over to Rene. And feel free to write any questions as you have them in the chat box, and I will bring them up during the presentation. But we will also have a question and answer session at the end.
Oh, thank you, Conchita. I really appreciate that. So good afternoon, everyone. So hopefully folks will let us know, I'm all plugged up and put notes on my door, so hopefully there won't be any disturbances, but if any reason I don't sound good or I'm talking too fast or anything like that, just please let us know, because I do have a tendency sometimes to get to going because I get excited about this topic. So so as Conchita said, I am Rene Averitt-Sanzone, and I'm with the Parents Place of Maryland. And so for the next hour or so, I'm going to just talk about and share how some ideas and thoughts on how to be your child's best advocate, and would love questions that folks may have. Conchita, you shared that some folks may be outside of the state of Maryland, so please know that also we can talk about other resources in your state as well, and we're happy to help you with that. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Before we dive into just basically how to be your child's best advocate, I'd like to well, hopefully my slides will advance. There you go. Like to talk a little bit about the Parents Place of Maryland, which I think helps frame our topic for today and the work that we do. So the Parents Place of Maryland, or we'll also call ourselves PPMD, because you can't do this work without an acronym, right? But really like folks to know that we're really grounded in our mission. And our mission is to empower families as advocates and partners in improving education and health outcomes for their children with disabilities and special health care needs. So if you'll notice in that, though, we're not doing the advocating. Our mission is around empowering families to be the advocate and the partner, because we believe, and we're grounded in the mission, that we believe that families know their child best, and so therefore they are their child's best advocate, and that's what we're here to do to help them. A little bit more about us. So we are Maryland's Special Education and Health Information Center. We were established in 1990, and I'm so twofold. One, I am the Parents Place of Maryland is a private nonprofit that is governed by a board, and my board is made up of more than 51% of parents of children with disabilities and special health care needs. So that part is awesome. And then our team is made up of a majority of parents or people on my staff that have family members. So some folks have nieces, some folks have siblings, and some folks are moms. So we really are, we've got this really nice sandwich going on of really understanding families having children with disabilities and special health care needs. I think one of the pieces that also makes us kind of unique, but I am a little biased about the Parents Place of Maryland, is that we are the only statewide organization that does all disabilities and all children with special health care needs. And so that really makes it a one-stop. So when families call here, they reach out to us via our website or email or in a training that that we serve all disabilities and all special health care needs. So I think that makes us another reason. I think that makes us pretty unique and hopefully a good resource for families and for professionals as well. So, like I said, we cover the whole entire state, and even though some folks like to say Maryland is small, it's definitely mighty, and there's a lot of, even though Maryland is a small state, there is still lots of folks who need us. So we do that in a variety of ways. We were started doing with one-on-one assistance to families. So families pick up the phone, give us a call, or families email us or contact us through the website, and then we follow up with phone calls so that we have that one-on-one piece for families. We also do it through resource sharing. So we have, anytime we work with a family, we're always sending them resources, but we also have fairly recently redesigned our website in response to what families tell us, is that they want to be able to go to our website and download a fact sheet or listen to a podcast or watch a video on our YouTube channel on a variety of topics. So we're always doing that type of resource sharing for families. And the piece about our resources are that they're based in evidence. So our resources are evidence-based, based on research, and they're also written in really parent-friendly language, as well as we're working in the process of really trying to also translate a lot of our materials into Spanish, because that is one of our largest populations. We provide trainings for families, so trainings like what we're doing today, a webinar. We also provide trainings for small groups of families. We provide trainings that are like institutes, so they're day-long trainings. We provide leadership trainings, which are over a long period of time on a wide variety of topics. So we're always training. The other piece we do is that we have some staff that are actually in pediatric practices. So meeting families where they are. So we know lots of times families are in the doctor's offices. So some of our pediatric practices have what we call a parent partner in those practices. So when there's those questions about school and health and all of those kind of full buffet of things that come with our kids, there's a person there that can also help with that. We have targeted military outreach and Spanish outreach, as well as outreach to our other underserved populations and underrepresented populations. So we have large populations. In fact, our military, Maryland is top 10 in the nation of concentration of military families, and there's a lot of really unique needs that come to that. As well as we provide training to graduate students. So we all probably have heard stories of families or have been in a situation where a doctor or someone has shared some information in a less than helpful way. So we also do training for graduate students, just trying to help them to understand, for a short period of time, what it means to walk just a little bit in a family's shoes. So we also provide some training with that as well. Okay, so the reason we do all of this is that We really want to help families to better understand their children's disability, education, and healthcare needs. Also, to really how to communicate effectively with schools, doctors, the professionals related to supporting our kiddos, and the agencies that also support us. And then understand what their rights and responsibilities are under special education law and regulations. So to really just be that partner and that advocate, so that they're just really informed and supported and empowered to do that work. So, all right, enough about Parents Place of Maryland, which I could talk about that one forever. So let's really get down to kind of why we're here today, is that we really want to look at how do we set the stage for our families and for our children to, to really be, to really change the trajectory and really look at really improved outcomes, because that's what we're all in the business of that. So, and this is a journey. So, which is part of the reason we do talk about how do you become your child's best advocate. So one of the ways we start with is we do talk a little bit about the brief history of how all of this came to be. Because for those of us that have been doing this work for a really long time, I won't tell you how long, but you'll figure it out at the end when I talk about my kids. A lot of times folks don't really understand or conceptualize how long we've been doing this work. It's a long time, but it's not a long time. So most of us know that in 1970, so here's your history lesson, folks. In 1975, a lot of us remember it as 94-142. That was the first piece of legislation that came into effect that really said our kids could be educated in school, right? And so this was a groundbreaking piece of legislation. And because this legislation for special education has money attached to it, it has to be periodically, it has to be reauthorized. And so you'll notice, so in 1975, when it was first passed, it really only addressed kids that were school age kids, so 5 to 21. And which, trust me, that was great, but it kind of left out a big pocket of population, which was this birth to 5, what I call our itty bitties, our babies. And so as the law was reauthorized, it was expanded to include our young ones. So in 1986, the law was reauthorized, and of course, they can't not change the names. So obviously in 1986, it was expanded, included our little ones, and it became the Education of the Handicapped Act amendments. Now remember, this was a long time ago, so we were still using that terminology, even though now today we would never use that. And then in 1990, it was reauthorized again and became the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And then it was reauthorized again. And then I like how in 1997, they expanded it. They kept the name, but they just said, we're going to call it amendments. So in 1997, it really broadened even more so topics around different disability categories, as well as talking about transition and the transition, big kid transition. So the law got broader with those pieces. And then the last time we were reauthorized was 2004, and of course that's what most folks know it as is IDEA. So we've stuck with that because it just is easier for families and easier for us to call it that. But one of the things is that it's really important is to understand a little bit of the history that and where we are today and how we got here. So again, not too long ago, but still it's important to understand where we've come from. So we're up to date on the legislation around special education. But not too long ago, most folks know this, there was a Supreme Court ruling. Lots of folks have heard the term called Andrew F. But what's really nice about this piece is that there was some really language changes in this piece that really, aligned with what we all believe about our kids, is that our kids, there should be ambitious goals for our kids, and there should be high expectation. And we really should be looking at a child's potential and when it relates to their education. And then, of course, beyond, we should always have high expectations and look at those pieces when it comes to our kids. So really what this does is when we're really talking about becoming your child's best advocate is really helping families and professionals really look at, okay, so here's more language around just really expecting um, good outcomes for our kids. So that's one piece, and we've talked about the federal stuff, but it's also really important for families to understand, particularly families that live in Maryland, that so there's a federal law, which is fantastic, but then there's a state law. So every state, Maryland's no different, writes a special education law and has regulations about that says, okay, this is how we're going to implement and do special education in our state. So you'll hear things, a lot of times you also hear the term COMAR. And one of the really important things about becoming your child's best advocate is we can become really good at acronyms. So if you noticed, we talked about 94-142 and we talked about IDEA. And so I made a real point of making sure I was spelling all of that out, because part of what can be really intimidating for families, and which is one of the reasons I spell this stuff out, is when acronyms start getting used a lot. So if families hear the term COMAR, a lot of times, so that's why it says, it basically is Code of Maryland Regulations. That's what it stands for. And so it's really important that families understand that that Maryland has a special education law. And what's really fantastic is about Maryland is that Maryland's special education law is actually broader than the federal law, which every state's allowed to be broader. So that's a really nice thing to know about Maryland for families. But it also says in COMAR, just like it does in federal legislation, that parents are an equal member of the team. And it's really important that we need to believe that. So remember when I talked at the very beginning that we believe at the Parents Place of Maryland that you're your child's best advocate, the law basically says that you're an equal member of the team. And that really is important for us as families to really own that and really believe that as we are coming to the table to be our child's best advocate. And when we understand that, then that's when we start working on our knowledge and our skills. We learn the policies and procedures. We learn our child's disability. We learn our child's strength. How do they learn best? How do things work for them at home that we've seen? What are our kids like? What are our kids dislike? We look at our communication style. So, because we all have to understand it is a team. So it's an individualized education program, but it is a team. And to be a member of that team, we need to also really not only know the things about our child, but also know ourselves. So I thought what we would do is kind of touch on those big buckets of those skills and what we need to learn and know. But before I go any further, I thought maybe I would just stop and see if there were questions or comments, take a quick pause because I have been talking here for a little bit.
And I just unmuted everybody, so you can either kind of speak up and ask your question, or you can type it in the chat box, whatever works best.
Okay, well, if folks are like me, I will always ask questions and then I forget that I've muted myself. So I, like I said, sometimes technology is not my strong suit. So please feel free, like Conchetta said, is jump in, ask questions. I'm a mom. I don't know what it means to complete a sentence without somebody interrupting. So no worries there, or feel free to chat. All right. So let's start diving into the things we need to be working on to be our child's best advocate. Okay, so you are the expert. I know I'm sounding like a broken record here, but it's really important for you guys to know this. So when I started on this journey, it was intimidating, and it's hard and it's scary. It's really, a lot of times we come into these meetings and there's lots of people sitting around the table and they all have these big long initials behind their names, and they're, throwing out words like, age equivalent, or, their grade level, or their fluency, or they're talking about, a KRA, or they're talking about an IEP or an IFSP. So they start using all of this kind of mumbo jumbo, and they start saying things like, oh, well, we want to look at the WISC, or we want to look at the WJ, or whatever. And that stuff is really, really, really intimidating. And it just can just really sometimes make no sense to us. So what I want everyone to remember is that there are initials behind our name too. And so I always love when folks say to me, well, what's your degree, or what do you have a degree in? And, every once in a while, I do want to look at them and say, well, my degree is an MOM because I'm a mom. So I think that's a piece that we need to remember. So when I started on this journey, when my daughter was 5-6 months old, I never will forget, when I first expressed my concerns, it was my doctor who said, you are her mom, you know her best. So you guys could substitute, you are her grandma and you know her best, you are her aunt, you are her dad, you are her grandpa, because families all look very different. But I think it's one of these things that we really need to hear, that, and if nobody's ever told you that, those of you that are on the phone today or on the Zoom room, is you are her, fill in the blank, you know her best. And that's just really, really, really powerful, which really helped to set me on that trajectory of really learning and having that belief in myself. So we got to believe we can do this. Even though sometimes it seems hard, we got to believe in it. One of the next pieces that I think is really, really, really important in our foundation, after you're firmly cemented in the belief that you're the expert. So where do we go now? What is your vision? And what is the vision for your child? So depending on the age of your kid, it looks really different, So when my daughter was, the first time somebody kind of asked me these questions, I think my daughter was 3, 2, something like that. And they didn't quite ask me it this way, but they asked me what my daughter's strengths were and what her weaknesses were, which I'm not a big fan of weaknesses, but it could have been challenges, would have been a better word, but that's a long time ago. And I really, truly blanked and could not figure out what her strengths were. So for me, but I could tell you what her weaknesses were. And what I had said was her weaknesses were she was stubborn, strong-willed, and determined, because she was 2, if you all remember that me saying that. So, of course, which 2-year-old isn't all of those things? But there was a real aha moment for me in that said, wait a minute, those are also her strengths, which then really grounded me in the vision. And so there's lots of ways you can use this. I just really like this tool here. And it's a set of tools that comes from Charting the Life course. We use these in Maryland a lot. We've kind of adopted these tools in Maryland. But what's really nice is, so when your kids are little, we obviously as parents have dreams and visions and hopes. And then as our kids get older, we really need to be asking them and start shifting, which that's a whole other webinar, letting go, shifting ourselves that it's what's their vision. So if you think back, our parents probably wanted one thing for us, and what we actually ended up doing with our life, which is fine, probably were two different things. So this is just a really useful tool. And and sometimes it's easier to start with what I don't want for my child, or what my child doesn't want, or my young adult doesn't want. Then that helps get us to that vision for the good life. And what I think is a really useful tool about this around how to be your child's best advocate is when you are going to your IFSP meetings, so your itty bitties, the Individualized Family Service Plan, or kids birth to 3. Maryland, we have the extended IFSP up to 4. But also then your IEP meetings, really saying, okay, when we're talking about parental input and we're talking about what is our vision, this is a really useful tool if you take the time to write this stuff down to really frame your IEP team meetings or your IFSP meetings, to really look at what is my vision for the good life so that people understand that. Because remember, you're the one constant in that IEP team. So you're going to be there every single IEP meeting. You're going to be there. You're the one that's the consistency. So really grounding the team with all of those pieces. But the other piece is it also helps us wrap our head around the fact that there is a life after school. So right now for us as parents, we go, oh my goodness gracious, we're in school for like 13 years or longer, depending on our kiddos. But the reality is both of my daughters are grown, and I look back now, and that time in school was really a blip. It went by so quick. So this also keeps kind of I like to call it our North Star. Keeps our eye on that end prize, because really what we're looking for, which is what all families are looking for, is what is that good life that I want for my kid. Okay, so here's one of the things that is we really need to get real for a second about this. At the end of the day, this is our baby. Regardless if your baby is 2, your baby is 12, your baby is 22, or your baby is 32. They are still your baby. And I need, I call my youngest my baby, and she's 24. And my oldest, who's 28. So, I know I need to stop, but they humor me. But because they are a baby and they are number one, there's a lot of emotions that are involved with all of this. And so one of the things we really need to look at is, have we dealt with our emotions? And I'm not saying, don't have them, because definitely we need to have our feelings, and we're entitled to have these feelings, all of them. But think about if we're angry about something that's going on in our child's life. Maybe things at school aren't so great. Maybe it's stuff outside of school that we're angry about. Like we've just had a big old fight with the insurance company and we're frustrated about something. We've been trying to get a piece of equipment, or we're afraid we've just gotten some really kind of not so great news from the medical field, or we're sad because something has changed. All of these things are really important feelings, but bringing them to an IEP team meeting with lots of other folks sometimes can get in the way of us being the best advocate for our child and being an equal member of the team. So really, what are some ways that we can look at taking care of those feelings prior to going into a team meeting? Is it writing them down? Is it, if some of us see a counselor talking to someone, or are talking with a faith-based person, or a really good friend, is really dealing with our emotions before we walk into our team meetings with our school. Again, but still being really clear about expressing them in really constructive ways that are really helpful. And so, that's what we're trying to do is, and always, but then if we go back to, okay, so wait a minute, I know this is happening, but what's that vision? So what's that eye on the prize? What's that, that helps us so that we don't maybe get stuck in the weeds with our emotions, but also being really clear, like if really great things are happening, make sure that, we're taking the time to celebrate all of these, all of these feelings and emotions. But sometimes we have these emotions because maybe we're not feeling heard. So what does what is one, what does that look like and feel like? But also saying, okay, so maybe is there maybe why am I not being heard? Do I need to try presenting it in a different way? Or do I need to look at trying to bring in additional team members? So just really looking at how we can look at some of these strategies. But one of the other things we need to also realize is sometimes our emotions can get ramped up. What if we're not sleeping? What if we're not taking care of ourselves? So really looking at that, because I know that if I don't get enough sleep, I tend to be not a very pleasant person to be around. So also being really clear about how we're care of taking care of ourselves. I like making lists and really kind of trying to figure some out so I can organize some things, so that we're going to these. At the end of the day, what we're trying to do is be that equal member of the team so that it's really meaningful and productive with those things. But again, so think about some ways that you can support yourself and take care of yourself through all of that. Okay. So again, lots of people are sitting around the team. And like I said, sometimes there's this jargon and this acronyms and, saying some things that you're just like, wait a minute. So here's a small list of some tips and strategies that might be helpful when folks are talking to us. I like to call it that educationese, that jargon that folks do. Um, and one of the things I really always like to operate from the premise of is asking why, and please help me understand. Because I believe that what happens if every member on that IEP team won the lottery or won the Powerball, okay, and they retired the next day? The only person left for the new team members who weren't lucky enough to get in on that ticket that the school folks bought is, that, and they didn't cut me in on a slice of it, is I have to be able to explain this IEP to the next team and the next year's teachers. So that's where and again, I'm not trying to say that we need to be spending hours at the team meeting, but that's really great is having those, parent teacher conferences outside, having correspondences, just really trying to do kind of your homework. So, beforehand. And I also preface this by being really honest. Also saying things like, but being really specific. So when I say, help me understand, it's, I'm not understanding such and such, or I'm not understanding what that reading score means. So help me understand, what does that mean as far as what kind of books they can read? And help me understand so I can help my child at home and with those kinds of things. And so really prefacing it that way and remembering to be really kind of specific about it. One of the other pieces of advice I got when my daughter was really, really, really young was was one to ask why, but the other one was don't take no for an answer. And so some folks may be looking at this going, Rene, you've talked about being a team member. That sounds maybe that it might be a little confrontational, a little adversary. And really, no, it's not, it is not, but let's think about it positively. So not taking no for an answer is what we're saying is let's figure this out. We're all really smart people that all care deeply about my child. So what do we need? Do we need more training and professional development? Do we need to bring other team members in to help us? So really looking at it from a place of how can we be solution oriented with this. Another tip that I've always found to be very helpful is, can you show me where that's written? Because sometimes people can do their best to explain it to you, but sometimes it may not be jiving. I don't know, maybe I haven't had enough coffee that day or what. But really, can you show me where that's written? Because sometimes folks are very well intended, but sometimes they may make a statement because that's what they've heard somebody else say, or it's just to become part of just kind of the language that is used. But the reality is that may not be based in something that's been written, like a policy or a procedure. So I just always ask folks, can you just show me where that's written? Because I'm just trying to understand and learn more. Because there's lots of papers and lots of stuff and lots of moving pieces on this. So sometimes folks just need to know that, maybe looking at something, maybe the people on your team are new, maybe they haven't had a chance to be trained yet or attend a professional development an opportunity. Maybe it's been something that's been updated by Maryland State Department of Education, and it just hasn't made it all the way to the locals yet, even though they work really super hard at that. So just really looking at it in writing might really kind of help the process move forward as we are, really looking for, working on, having those high expectations and really looking at and having good outcomes for our kids with those pieces. All right. So one of the other tips and strategies is the piece of you got to document. There are lots of things that are discussed at an IEP meeting. There are lots of things that are discussed at lots of our meetings at our schools. And, yes, there are people that take notes, but at the end of the day, it's always prudent to document. People get busy, somebody might have missed putting something down because we're all human. So we always encourage families to just document everything in writing. This also holds all of us kind of accountable. What did I say I was going to do? What did you say you were going to do? So that we're all working together as a team. But also, sometimes when we're doing all of this, we might have also just simply misunderstood. So we really do encourage all parents, and technology for those parents that can access it. This has actually made life a lot easier. Back in the day when my kids were younger, we had to still use, a typewriter, which I know some of you may not be old enough to know what that is, but we would have to type up letters. So, knowing that is great. And we really always want folks to thank everybody for meeting with them, and really talking about this was my understanding, and really then outline what was in the meeting. And then always say, if I've misunderstood, please let me know, so that we can really just, again, make sure that we're always keeping the lines of communication open, because that's just critical to the success of all of this work. But also, One of the nice things about documenting, because I know this could have a negative tone, so always thanking, but one of the other things is when we talk with families and work with families is also always looking for the opportunities when you document to thank people and to tell people they're doing a really, really, really good job, or they've done something great, or your kid has come home talking about somebody great. Because one of the things is, at the Parents Place of Maryland, I wish I could say that the calls that we get are because parents are happy and everything is going hunky-dory in their child's education. But that's not that's not always the case. So families call us when there's problems or they have concerns. And so, and it happens to be the same thing in a school building. Usually the principal only gets a call, or the assistant principal only gets a call when something isn't working well. All right. Or, so if your child's teacher, therapist, whoever has done something really good or has really done something that's up and above, or just your kid is really, let them know, so that the teacher is hearing good things, the principal's hearing good things about their teachers, but also, like, say your kid, something you've been working on and the kid comes home and it's a skill or it's something, and the kid comes home and does it beautifully and spontaneously, let the teacher know. So, because they don't always hear the good things either. So this is also another way of documenting it, so that the good things go in the school's records as well with that. So I'm going to pause again before I jump into some really concrete resources and see if maybe there were any, if folks like me figured out how to unmute themselves, if there were any sort of questions or comments. Okay, well, I will move on. Hopefully I haven't put folks to sleep yet. So, so let's move on to some concrete resources that help. So remember when I mentioned COMAR, Code of Maryland Regulations, earlier on. So part of being the equal team member is really getting familiar with the policies and procedures as it relates to special education. And there are a wealth of resources on Maryland State Department of Education's website. Sometimes, not going to lie, I have found their website just a little bit hard to navigate. So what we have done is those resources that are really tangible around resources that are very helpful for families around special education, we have put them on our website so that it's a little easier. We think it's a little easier to find because they are such powerful documents. And we may not have all of them, but we're working on getting them out. So really also making sure that you check out our website, which is very simple, ppmd.org. So one of the things that we feel is really, 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 really helpful is, so if we think it's complicated, oh my goodness gracious, it's complicated for the school folks too, to do all of this work. And lots of forms, lots of paperwork, lots of everything, because there's lots of documentation that has to happen. So what Maryland State Department of Education, but if you noticed, I use an acronym at the top, MSDE, so I'm just as guilty. So Maryland State Department of Education releases they write and release what they call technical assistance bulletins. Sometimes you'll hear them referred to as TABs, TAB, again, another acronym, that really just provides exactly that, technical assistance, and really helps people understand, some further clarification, some further support, and those kinds of things. So if you'll notice, so like parental consent under Maryland law, November of 2017. The Technical Assistance Bulletin on Specific Learning Disabilities. There's a technical assistance on early childhood. There's one on curriculum and instruction and assessment. And so these are really, really, really helpful bulletins to read. So, but one of the things I have to understand is, so these guys, you folks just need to understand, is that these are written for for professionals, so teachers. So the language is really high, and they're very dense, and they're very heavy. So just be really patient as you plow through them. We're working hard also to really look at ways that we could put these in a little more parent-friendly language, so it makes it easier for families to understand, and also looking at how could we possibly, maintaining the integrity of all of the documents, but how can we also chunk them so it makes it easier for families to digest them as well. But we also think that would probably be helpful for professionals that are working with our kids with that. So these are huge resources as well. And like I said, we're in the process of trying to make sure that they're linked on our website, because sometimes, like I said, they can be hard to find on the Maryland State Department of Education website. But I think at the end of the day, if you have any questions, we're here, and we're here to help you. So I've included our website and our online help form, because lots of our families like to do that. But then you could also do the good old-fashioned pick up the phone and call us, and we'll definitely get you a parent educator to support and help you and work with that. Also, just remember when I said the majority of my staff is parents of children with disabilities, or family members with disabilities or special health care needs. Excuse me. So even though I may not have, or my staff may not have, the same disability as a parent who's called here, but we do know what it means to sit in an IEP meeting. We know what it means to sit, excuse me. You need a drink of water there, sorry. We also know what it means to sit in that doctor's office. We know what it means to do that. So there's also that piece of we've walked in those shoes, we are walking in those shoes, and so on some level that also just is nice to be able to talk to someone like that. So please always feel free to reach out to us. So as I promised, so I love this because my daughters now live in different states, so they can't tell mom to stop doing this. And so this is why I do this work. So if you are looking at your computer screen, the young lady on the right is my oldest daughter, who just graduated from college in May and is a high school math teacher. And then the daughter on the left, this was her college graduation. And I always laugh. I said, she's working for a tech company. I don't know what that means, but basically they're busy being adults. And as I always like to joke, they don't ask me for money and they have benefits. So I think that's a good thing. So that's a little bit about myself and my daughters. And I just really want to thank everybody for listening. And so I'm just going to, Conchetta, see if there was any questions or comments that folks may have, or you may have, I should say.
I guess a question that I get from parents is, so they, they reach out to you, and do you attend IEP meetings with parents?
Oh my gosh, that was the elephant in the room. Thank you for asking that question. I wish we could, but we can't. One, we cover the whole entire state, so I don't have enough staff to support doing that work. But also at the end of the day, us going to a meeting might be, really perceived as being an advocate, and that's not what we are. So no, we do not. I wish we could on some level as support people, not as advocates. So I wish we could though, but thank you for asking that.
Renee,
Yes.
this is Sandy. I checked to make sure I was unmuted. So I'm actually here as a representative from the Maryland Parents of Blind Children. And if you have parents with vision issues that they're dealing with, we do have volunteers who will go to IEP meetings who have themselves children with blindness or low vision, and can answer some of those questions for the parents either before the meeting or sit in the meeting and help, especially the newer parents, navigate services and what to be expecting and asking for and looking for in those IEPs for their children with low vision.
Oh, that's great. If you could send me some of that, so what I can then do is when we do get those calls from families, what we can do, also say to families is, here is a kind of that parent-to-parent support that can help you with those pieces. Absolutely.
Okay. Is your contact information probably in the registration page?
I'm not 100% sure, to be honest, but it's super easy. It's my name, which is Rene, R-E-N-E, at ppmd.org.
Okay, I can find that.
Oh, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I put the information about this webinar out on a couple different Parents of Blind Children Facebook groups, but apparently we didn't get the response I was hoping for, because we have lots of parents with kids who have blindness issues that have concerns about school and education and IEPs. So it's a big question that we get.
Absolutely. And one of the other things is that also then is, as the kids start getting older, around transition and all of the different supports and services that can happen around that. Because technology has really done an amazing job of, I don't want to say leveling the playing field, but leveling the playing field for our young folks with blindness and visual impairment. That's been awesome.
And we have some parents that are at that point, myself included. My own daughter is transitioning to community college, so we're dealing with DSS offices instead of.
Yeah, if we can help with that, let us know, because I've done 2 through college, and 4 different disability services. So if I could ever help, let me know.
Absolutely, we've had some bumps in the road already, so we've already. There's a meeting set up later this month with the president of the college, with folks from NFB, because there's been some problems.
Yeah, and that's a whole Conchetta, that's a whole nother webinar around transition. And once kids leave school. I shouldn't call them kids, young adults.
We have a question from Dawn. I'm not sure if you're unmuted, Dawn, but if you wanted to share your question.
Yeah, well, thank you. Renee, this is Dawn. I'm from Virginia.
And, hi, Dawn. How are you?
Great. I actually work for the Family to Family Network in Virginia. Yeah. So what I was wondering, though, is kind of tagging on to what Sandy mentioned is, do you all have, you say that you cover all disabilities. And I'm wondering if you guys actually have someone on staff who is blind and visually impaired. Their focus is around blindness and visual impairments.
Let me stop and think about my staff. Trying to think. No, I do not have that particular disability represented. No, we don't. So that's one of the things when Sandy was talking about. So you're right. So if a family was trying to, talk about some frustrations around Braille or orientation and mobility, you're right. I don't have a parent that has that lived experience, but when Sandy just talked about that piece is, we are definitely knowledgeable about what that, kind of the accommodations, modification, and goals and objectives that need to be on a child's IEP to support and learn all of those great skills and those kinds of things. But having that resource that Sandy just offered, I think is going to be a nice parent-to-parent support that is always invaluable. So, yeah. So no, I do not have that particular disability. I had to stop and go through the list, but no, I
Yeah.
don't have that one. Mm-mm.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I'd like to connect maybe after, and I'll get your contact information.
Sure.
And I'm going to send
Absolutely.
an email out tomorrow with everybody that registered. And it's going to have the link for the survey in case you don't get it from the chat box. And then also, if you don't mind, Renee, your PowerPoint so that people can have the information.
Yeah, sure. Yes, because I think there's a couple of things some slides I hid because they weren't relevant. So I will make sure that I send you a cleaned up one and email that to you immediately. Be happy to. And then the other thing is we have I just realized it, an updated fact sheet that really kind of highlights the tips that I talked about. So I'll also send that as another resource for families as well.
Perfect.
Well, Renee.
Oh, and I just saw that, Dawn, you asked a question about the webinars, and I just saw that I actually replied to Renee instead of replying to everybody. So I'm going to now put that in the chat box so that everyone can see it.
And Renee, Sandy again, just want to say, yeah, I definitely give you the contact information because not only do the parents group do parent-to-parent things, but for the families where things have gotten, where they've tried everything and they're beyond, working it out in the IEP meeting and they need more than just some parent-to-parent help. The NFB of Maryland also is available to help them decide at what point they need to consider going beyond working it out around the table and mediation or legal action, because there are some counties in Maryland that are not staffed appropriately to provide the services the kids need.
Yeah, I've heard that. So yeah, so no, that's always good to know because we do not, by any stretch of the imagination, we just inform families and talk about, and here are your options under, the policies and procedures, and then ultimately it's always the family's decision with this, what they choose to do, because we're not walking in their shoes, so to speak. But
Exactly.
It is nice. So and we are not attorneys, and we're not psychologists or speech therapists or orientation and mobility experts. We're not any of those things, but we do those pieces. So but we also don't recommend and we also don't refer, but what we can do as part of that resource sharing, particularly for those families, I think that would be, I'd love, again, we're always trying to increase our resources. So that is just a huge help for us. So thank you.
And it's a huge help for us because we have the same issue with how to find the families who need help. We know that they're out there, but because of privacy, we can't, getting the word out that we exist is sometimes tricky. If they don't find us on Facebook or come to an event, or they don't know about the events that we offer, then they don't know that we can do these kind of things to help them out with the school stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if I had a nickel for every time I've had a family who calls here with a 14-year-old, a 15-year-old that never heard of us, I would never have to worry about funding from my nonprofit. So, yeah.
All right. Well, if there's any other questions, thank you, Renee, so much for doing this webinar. I feel like every time I do a webinar, it's like, okay, what are the 3 webinars that came out of it that we need to do more? So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And hopefully this is a resource. It will be posted on our YouTube page, and I will email everybody who's on the call and everybody who registered so that they have your PowerPoint and presentation. So feel free to look on the link that's in the chat box for further webinars, and I'll also send that in the email tomorrow. So thank you so much.
You are so welcome. Thank you again. And I always appreciate the fact that I feel like I just got more out of this webinar than maybe I probably gave you all. So thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thanks. Conchita?
Yeah.
Quick question. When you're thinking about more webinars for the future, definitely Dawn and I were having a side conversation, and some access to this is a great IEP 101, but some webinars around more advanced issues dealt with in IEPs and transition would be great. Also, if we can get some of those at some point.
Great. And I think having one specifically around blindness and low vision and saying, okay, these are what the IDEA says specifically about these issues. So yeah, that would be great. Thank you. And the survey asks those questions. If you can put, if you can fill out the survey and list kind of the webinars that would be interested, and if you would want to lead one, you and Don co-lead,
Okay.
that would be great.
Okay. Well, yeah, this is great, and I have to commend you on all of the resources that you're posting on the site that you've got now that you're working as the low vision, low incident specialist.
Thank
Excellent.
you so much.
Thank
All
you.
right. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.